Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you what Emacs's built-in version control can do if you're using Git. Probability is pretty high that you're using a version control system for your code, and of course you should. And there are a number of version control systems out there. Emacs comes with a built-in version control interface that supports several systems, for example Bazaar, CVS, Git, Mercurial, Monotone, RCS, SRC, SCCS and SVN. And Emacs features a uniform interface for every one of these systems. That means that the hotkeys are always the same, independent from the system that's in place. And Git being, of course, one of the most popular version control systems, there are several other version control interfaces for Git, with Magit or Magit being one of the most popular ones. But Emacs's built-in version control has some pretty useful functionality as well, and I'm going to show you in this video. So let's start. I have prepared a little Git repository that we are going to take a quick look at in the command line. It's just a small folder. As you can see, we're going to take a look at a C file and a header file. The rest of the files in this folder are not very interesting. It's just some CMake and Ninja files, but we're not going to take a look at them. As you can see, if I type in git status, all of those are not currently tracked by Git. So let's clear the screen real quick. I have two branches, a test branch and the master branch, and I have also done some test commits, as you can see, just some initial commits and just testing some things out so that we can have a look at them in Emacs and see what Emacs can do in combination with Git. So let's switch over to Emacs. I've prepared a little file on the right that is going to show the things I'm going to cover in this video, and of course it's also a list of hotkeys that might be pretty helpful. And on the left I have my demo.c file that I showed you before. So if we just go over to our command line and we enter show branch, no, it's not show branch, it's git status, it's dir, that's it. As you can see, we have the demo C and demo H in our directory. Let's clear the screen real quick and go back to Emacs. So the first thing I want to show you is status of directory, which is Control C. As you can see down here, I pressed the wrong one. It's Control X, of course, V and D, and you get this little query. We see status for directory, and it's the directory that we're in and that our Git repository is in, so we can confirm via pressing enter. And as you can see, we get this list of unregistered files that we also got in our command line. So if we switch back to our command line real quick, and if I enter git status, I get all the untracked files, and I also get those by entering or by pressing Control X VD, which is the status of the directory. And if I were to change something now, for example, if I want to add some unnecessary variable, let's go with this for example, and I check the directory again, I can see, oh, demo.c, which is tracked by the version control, is actually edited. So cxvd, status of the directory, basically is git status, or is equivalent to git status, because if we take a look at our command line right now and we enter git status, we get the modified demo.c, which is the same as edited in our built-in version control in Emacs. Another pretty useful feature is looking at the commit history for a special file or for the whole tree. And this can be done by pressing cxvl. And if I switch over to our demo C file, we can take a look. cx or control x vl, and we can get a list of commits, as you can see over here. And if we have the cursor at a specific commit and we press D, we get the diff for the commit. So we can go into each commit and see the diff to the previous commit. And as you can see, that's the initial commit. We can also take a look at the header file. I'm going to show you real quick. As you can see, cxvl, we only have one commit for the header file, and it's just some random struct. Now that we have taken a look at single files, we can also take a look at the complete Git repository. This is done by pressing cx v and the capital L, and this gives us a list of all the commits, as you can see. So we have a nice little list of all the commits, including where our master branch is and where our feature branch is. And if we press enter, we can see the commit message down here. And we can also press D and get the diff to the previous commit. So that's also very, very handy. So now that we have taken a look at the logs, let's take a look at Annotate. Git has a pretty cool, or VC Git has a pretty cool Annotate in combination with Emacs, and Annotate is done by pressing CX-VG, and of course if I'm talking about CX, this means it's Control and X. So let's take a look at Annotate. Annotate gives us this view of our C file, which is pretty awesome because you can see all of those were committed on the 3rd of November, and this one was committed on the 4th of November. You get the hash for the commit, and you get the coloring. So this can be pretty useful if you're in a work setting, for example, and you have a lot of people that are committing various bits of code to a file, and you want to find out who committed what part of a file. So that can be pretty useful, actually. Another useful hotkey is Control X VH, which is display history of changes for a selected region. So if I would, for example, mark this region, and I press Control X, V and H, I get the commit history just for this region. So there were 2 commits for this region, but if I take a look at the commit log for the whole file, for example, I can see there were 4 commits for the whole file. But for this specified region, there were only 2. So this might also be helpful depending on your use case. So now let's take a look at actually committing changes from within Emacs. First thing you have to do is there are 2 ways of committing. You can commit directly from a file, or you can select several files and commit a bunch of files. So let's take a look at the first way of committing. First way of committing is committing a file directly. So in order to commit the specified file, you can simply enter Control X VV in a selected file, and it will directly give you the log message screen. So let's just add another integer. So Control X VV, and as you can see, I get this VC log buffer, and down here I see which file I would be committing. So if I were to enter commit from within Emacs, so this is my commit message. I haven't committed anything yet, and if I didn't want to commit, I could just leave, or I could close the buffer and everything would be fine. But if I do want to commit, I have to enter Control C and Control C. So let's do it. Control C, Control C. And as you can see down here, it will show us checking in, done. So if we take a look at our history with Control X VL, the commit history for the demo.c file, we have another commit. And we can also take a quick look at the diff. And as you can see, these were the changes that we actually made to the file. So now that we have committed one file, let's take a look at committing several files at once. So we'll just add another line. Doesn't have to be anything particularly useful. And let's also change something in the header file so that we have several changes. Let's add another test struct. That is actually wrong. So let's do this. Let's go back to our demo.c file. And as I showed you before, we can take a look at the changes by pressing Control X VD. So let's do this. So we get the VC status for directory, and as you can see, we have two files edited. It's the demo.c and the demo.h. So if I wanted to commit several files at once, I have to mark them for commit. Same thing you would do in Git is basically you git add the files and then you can commit them. So if in order to add files in the vc-diff buffer, you just have to press M. And as you can see, you get the little star. So that means that this file is basically added for commit. And if I press M again, I get another star for the demo.h. So if I'm still in the vc-diff or in the status directory buffer, I can now press Control X VV the same way we did before for the demo.c file. And again, we get this vc log window. And as you can see down here, now we have two files that we are committing at once. So we are committing, is that the right way to write it? I don't know. Commit to file set once from Emacs. And same way as before, we commit by pressing Control C, Control C. And as you can see, checking in the first file and the second file, and it's done. And we can take a look at our history again. For demo.c, in this case, it's commit two files at once from Emacs. And if we take a look at the diff, it's of course the diff for demo.c, but we can take a look at the complete complete log. And as you can see, we have the diff for demo.h and the diff for demo.c. So we committed two files at once. So basically the last thing I wanted to show you is switching branches and merging branches. So sadly there is no way that I know of to rebase a branch. You can only merge a branch. If we are, for example, in our demo.c file, I can switch branches by entering Control X VR, which is this one, change branch. And I get this little tag name to retrieve. I can press tab and I get the list for head, test and master. So let's change to master and we get this little question whether we want to update any affected buffers, and we answer yes. And as you can see, the file changed and we are now on our master branch where we don't have the feature commits if we take a look at the log, for example. So now that we are on the master branch, we can actually merge our feature branch. We can do this by pressing Ctrl X VM, which is the same as git merge, and we merge from test. And as you can see, running git merge test, and it actually worked. Now we have the changes that we added before in our master branch. You can also push and pull branches from an upstream branch, but I don't have one configured for this Git repository, so I'm not going to be able to show you that. But just so you know, there are hotkeys for pushing a branch and for pulling a branch, and also displaying the changes that will be pushed, or displaying incoming changes if you're pulling from a branch. Some tiny tidbits that I did not mention before that I just realized is down here. You can see, okay, we are using Git, or basically Emacs has recognized that we are in a Git repository, and it will also show the branch that we're currently in. As you can see, we are in the master branch, and if we would, for example, switch to our test branch, we should, yes, it should switch to test. Another thing to mention that I didn't mention before is if we are taking a look at our changelog, the changelog by default only shows 2000 commits. We can press at show unlimited entries and it will show all the entries, but it's just something to keep in mind if you have a really long commit history, that it might not all be displayed in Emacs by default. So that's basically all I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good night.